You think you know the people you let into your family? You break bread with them. You trust them with your children. You believe in the face they show the world. I believed my son-in-law was a good man, a man of principle, a rising star in politics who talked about integrity and family values. I was proud when he married my daughter. I considered him a son, but I was wrong. I was sitting in my living room, watching him on television, lying to an entire city with a smile on his face. He was asking for their trust. He was asking for their votes. And every word out of his mouth was a carefully crafted lie. He had no idea I was holding the proof in my hand, a recording, his own voice, confessing to everything, the bribes, the corruption, the utter contempt he held for the very people he promised to serve. He stood there, in my home, and preached to me about morality. He looked me in the eye and talked about a spotless reputation. That was the moment I knew I had to destroy him. This is not a story about politics. This is a story about betrayal. This is about what happens when a father discovers that the man he welcomed into his family is a fraud, and the impossible choice he has to make: protect his daughter's happiness or expose her husband's lies and risk losing her forever. I chose the truth, and it cost me everything. If you've ever been deceived by someone you trusted, if you've ever had to make a choice between peace and principle, then you need to hear this story. Type "I'm listening" in the comments, and bear witness to how a single recording brought a hypocrite to his knees. This is the story of how I brought down my own son-in-law. There is a special kind of silence that falls over a room when a hypocrite is preaching. It's not a respectful silence. It's a heavy, uncomfortable quiet, filled with the unspoken words of everyone who knows the truth, but is too polite to say it. I was sitting at my daughter's dining table, surrounded by the smell of roasted chicken and the sound of my son-in-law, Councilman Robert Vance, holding court. "It's about integrity," he was saying, his voice smooth as polished glass, his hands gesturing for emphasis. He was looking around the table, making eye contact with my daughter, with his campaign manager, with me. That's what I'm offering this city. A return to core values, to family values. You cannot ask the public to trust you if you are not a man of your word in your own home. My daughter, Anna, gazed at him with pure admiration. She saw the perfect husband, the rising political star. I saw the boy who, 7 years ago, had sat at this very table and asked me for my blessing, his palms sweating on the tablecloth. I took a slow sip of my wine. "Core values," I repeated, my voice neutral. "That's a powerful phrase, Robert." He smiled, a wide, practiced television smile. "It's the only thing that matters, David. In the end, your reputation is all you have. It has to be spotless." I nodded, letting the silence stretch for a beat too long. "Spotless," I echoed. He missed the warning in my tone. He always did. He launched into another story about a political rival caught in a minor scandal. "And the hypocrisy," he said, shaking his head with theatrical disappointment. The man preached fiscal responsibility while his department was wasting taxpayer money on frivolous expenses. The public deserves better. The irony was so thick you could taste it, bitter on the back of your tongue. I looked down at my phone, sitting innocently next to my plate. It was just a device, a piece of glass and metal, but inside it was a recording, a memory, a conversation from 3 weeks prior. It had been another dinner. Just Robert and me in this very house while Anna was away visiting a friend. He'd been drinking expensive scotch, the kind he couldn't afford on a councilman's salary. The mask had slipped. "You have to understand how the game is played, David," he'd said, his words slightly slurred. "It's not about right and wrong. It's about wins and losses." He'd leaned in close, confident that his father-in-law was a harmless old man. "That new zoning law for the waterfront? A developer made it very worth my while to see it his way. Very worth my while." He'd winked. 50,000 reasons, to be exact. He'd laughed then, a smug, ugly sound. "And they call it constituent relations. It's beautiful, really. I stand up there and talk about moral clarity, and they cheer. They actually cheer I had excused myself to the bathroom. My hands were steady as I opened the voice memo app on my phone and pressed record. I left it on the counter when I returned, the tiny red light hidden by a hand towel. I listened to him for another hour. I listened to him brag about another donation, another backroom deal, another lie he'd spun for the press. He was building his kingdom on a foundation of rot, and he was bragging about the architecture. Now, back in the present, he was still talking. "So I'm asking for your votes," Robert said, finishing his little speech at the dinner table. He looked directly at me. "And your support, David." It would mean the world to me and Anna. I held his gaze. My daughter's hopeful eyes were on me. She wanted this. She wanted her father to bless her husband's ambition. "A spotless reputation," I said again, my voice quiet but clear. "It's all you have." That night, after I went home, I sat at my own desk. The house was silent. I pulled up the recording on my computer. I listened to his drunken boasts, his cynical laughter, his utter contempt for the people who trusted him. I edited it down to the most damning 3 minutes. The confession about the waterfront zoning, the phrase 50,000 reasons, the line about the cheering crowds. Then I opened a new email. I addressed it to the chief investigative reporter at the local television station, a woman known for her tenacity. I didn't write a long message. I didn't need to. The subject line was, "The Real Robert Vance." The body of the email was just one sentence. I thought the public deserved to know the man behind the slogan. My finger hovered over the send button. I thought of my daughter's face, the life she thought she had, the pain this would cause her. It was the only thing that gave me pause. But then I thought of Robert's smug, lying face at the dinner table, preaching about morality, preaching to me. I clicked send. The message vanished into the digital ether. There was no going back. The sermon was over. The reckoning was about to begin. He thought his words were just for a private audience. He was wrong. His biggest audience was yet to hear them, and they were not going to be cheering. If you believe that hypocrisy should have consequences, type "no more lies" in the comments below. This is just the beginning. The explosion is coming, and the fallout will be spectacular. Stay tuned. The 48 hours after I sent that email were the longest of my life. It was a strange, suspended silence. I went through my normal routine, watering the plants, reading the newspaper, taking my morning walk, but every moment was charged with a quiet, electric anticipation. I was waiting for the world to crack open. I saw Robert the next day. He was on the local news, cutting a ribbon for a new park. He was smiling, shaking hands, the perfect picture of a dedicated public servant. He looked right into the camera and said, "This is what happens when a community works together with integrity and a shared vision." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Anna. "Did you see Robert on TV? He did so well." I stared at the message. Her innocence was a knife in my heart. She was living in the beautiful prison he had built for her, and I was the one about to collapse the walls. I typed back, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy. He was very convincing. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He was standing on a stage he didn't know was about to be pulled out from under him. He was so proud of his performance, completely unaware that the director had just called for a different ending. The following evening, I was watching the nightly news. It started normally. The weather, a traffic report, a feel-good story about a local dog, and then the anchor's expression shifted. She became serious, leaning slightly forward. "We have a developing story tonight," she began, her voice grave. "A story that strikes at the heart of public trust. We have received an audio recording that appears to feature City Councilman Robert Vance." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The screen switched to a black background with the station's logo. And then his voice filled my living room. "You have to understand how the game is played, David. It's not about right and wrong. It's about wins and losses." Hearing it broadcasted, polished, and clear for the entire city was a visceral shock. It was one thing to have the secret, to hold the proof in my hand. It was another thing entirely to hear it weaponized, to hear his ugly, smug confidence echoing through thousands of homes. That new zoning law for the waterfront? A developer made it very worth my while to see it his way. Very worth my while. 50,000 reasons, to be exact. I could only imagine the reactions. People eating their dinner, freezing with a fork halfway to their mouths. His supporters, their faces falling in disbelief. His opponents, their eyes widening with grim satisfaction. The recording ended. The anchor was back on screen. "We have reached out to Councilman Vance's office for comment, but have not yet received a response. We will, of course, continue to follow this story." My phone rang. It was Anna. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. I knew I would have to answer eventually. I would have to face her tears, her confusion, her anger. But not yet. For this one brief moment, I just sat in the silence of my living room, the ghost of my son-in-law's confession hanging in the air. This wasn't a victory. It didn't feel good. It felt necessary. It felt like surgery. I had to cut out the cancer to save the patient, even if the patient, my daughter, would hate me for the scar. The silence in my house was broken by the sound of a car door slamming outside, then another. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. There were 2 news vans parked across the street, their satellite dishes raised like strange metallic flowers. The vultures had arrived. Robert's perfect, spotless reputation was now publicly, irreversibly stained. And he was just beginning to understand what true consequences felt like. He had spent his life building a house of cards and preaching about its solid foundation. And I was the one who had decided to open a window. The wind was here, and it was only getting started. The real drama isn't on the television screen. It's in the phone call I'm about to have with my daughter. It's in the confrontation that is now inevitable. If you think this is the end of the story, you are mistaken. This is only the first tremor of the earthquake. Type earthquake in the comments if you are ready for what happens next. The fallout is going to be brutal. The phone didn't stop ringing. It was a relentless, screaming alarm bell in the sudden chaos of my quiet home. Anna, Robert, unknown numbers. I knew were reporters. I let them all ring. I needed a moment to breathe, to steady the hammering in my chest. The silence was gone, replaced by a digital siege. Then, a different sound. A key turning in the front door. My heart froze. It was Anna. She had her own key. The door flew open and she stood there, silhouetted against the flashing lights from the news vans outside. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a hurricane of betrayal and confusion. "Dad?" Her voice was a broken whisper. Then it cracked into a scream. "What did you do?" She stumbled into the living room, holding up her phone, the screen glowing with a news headline. Councilman Vance bribery scandal. Explosive audio leaked. "Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Tell me it's a fake. A deep fake." She was trembling, her whole body shaking with the force of her sobs. I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her it would be all right. But I stood my ground. The truth was a wall between us now. "The audio is real, Anna," I said, my voice low and steady, though I felt anything but. "I recorded it in your dining room 3 weeks ago." The confirmation seemed to physically strike her. She staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. You recorded him? In our home? How could you? You betrayed us." "I betrayed you?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Anna, listen to what he said. He sold his vote. He took a bribe. He is a criminal who stands in front of cameras and preaches about morality. I didn't betray you. I was trying to protect you from him." "Protect me?" she shrieked, her voice raw. "By destroying my life? By humiliating me in front of the entire city? My friends are texting me, Dad. They've seen it. Everyone has seen it." "This isn't about humiliation," I fired back, the cold anger I'd been nursing for weeks finally rising to the surface. "This is about truth. He was building your life on a foundation of lies and corruption. How long did you think it would last? How long before it all came crashing down on you?" "He's my husband," she cried, her voice breaking. "You're supposed to be my father. You're supposed to support me." "I am supporting you," I roared, the force of it startling us both. "True support isn't watching you marry yourself to a sinking ship and applauding. True support is throwing you a life preserver, even if you hate me for the splash it makes." We stood there, chests heaving, the air thick with pain and fury. The chasm between us was now a mile wide and infinitely deep. Then my phone buzzed again on the table. This time, it was Robert. The screen flashed with his name, a pathetic, desperate little light in the dark room. Anna saw it. Her eyes met mine, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. "You've ruined everything," she whispered, the fight gone out of her, replaced by a hollow, devastating grief. She turned and ran out the door, back into the circus of flashing lights. I let her go. There was nothing more I could say. I looked at the phone, still buzzing. Robert, the architect of this misery. I picked it up. I didn't say hello. The sound on the other end was pure, undiluted panic. I could hear him breathing heavily, almost hyperventilating. In the background, I could make out the sound of his own television, playing the news report on a loop. David, you have to tell them it's fake," he gasped, his voice cracking. Tell them it's edited, out of context. You're my father-in-law. They'll believe you. I let the silence hang, letting him squirm in the terror of his own making. Are you there? David, please, my career, my life. It's over if you don't help me. Finally I spoke, my voice quiet, cold, and utterly final. You should have thought about your career, Robert, I said slowly, deliberately. You should have thought about your life. And you definitely should have thought about your family before you decided to sell your integrity for 50,000 reasons. There was a strangled sob on the other end of the line. I'll tell them it was you. I'll tell them you set me up. I almost laughed. It was the pathetic, flailing threat of a drowning man. Tell them whatever you want, Robert. But you and I both know the truth. The whole city knows the truth now. And the truth doesn't care about your excuses. I ended the call. I dropped the phone onto the sofa as if it were something contaminated. It was done. I walked back to the window. The news vans were still there. My daughter was gone. My son-in-law was shattered. I had wanted justice. I had wanted the truth to be known. But standing there in the eerie quiet after the storm, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a wasteland. He lost his career. She lost her illusion. And I fear I lost my daughter. But some lies are too poisonous to ignore. Some betrayals are too grand to forgive. I chose the truth. And now we all have to live in the world that truth has created. This is the price of principle. And the bill has just come due. If you have ever had to make a choice that you knew would cost you everything, type the price in the comments. You are not alone. The consequences are still unfolding. The political fallout, the legal battles, the personal wreckage. This is far from over. Subscribe, because the aftermath is a story in itself. The days that followed were a blur of grim headlines and a silence from my daughter that was louder than any scream. Vance suspended pending investigation. DA launches criminal probe into councilman. Where is the 50,000? FBI joins the fray. I read them all from my silent house. The life I had known was gone. The phone calls from Anna stopped. The texts ceased. The only sign she was even alive were the glimpses of her on the news, a haunted figure in a dark coat, hurrying into court buildings or her husband's attorney's office, her face hidden behind large sunglasses. She was a ghost, and I was the one who had haunted her. I was a ghost, too, trapped in my own home, a prisoner of the truth I had unleashed. Reporters camped on my lawn for a week before finally losing interest. The story was bigger than me now. It was about subpoenas and evidence and the slow, grinding wheels of justice. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The hardest part was the quiet, the emptiness, the knowing that I had done the right thing for the world. But in the process, I had broken the one person in it who mattered most. A month after the story broke, my doorbell rang. It wasn't a reporter. They had given up. It wasn't a process server. I'd already been served. Through the peephole, I saw her. Anna. My heart slammed against my ribs. I fumbled with the lock and opened the door. She looked older, thinner. The light in her eyes that Robert had always been so proud of charming was gone, extinguished. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice flat. I stepped aside. She walked in, not looking at me, and sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. The silence was a third person in the room, heavy and accusing. Finally she spoke, staring at a spot on the carpet. The FBI has all his financial records. The 50,000 was just the beginning. There was more. A lot more. She looked up at me, her eyes hollow. You were right. About everything. He's looking at federal charges. Prison time. There was no satisfaction in hearing it. No, I told you so. Just a profound, aching sadness. Why, Dad? She whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Why didn't you come to me first? Why did you have to blow up our entire world? I sat down opposite her, my own grief a stone in my throat. Because if I had come to you, what would you have done, Anna? Really? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought your old father was jealous, trying to cause trouble? You would have told him, and he would have spun another beautiful lie, and you would have believed him. And the only thing that would have changed is that he would have known I was on to him. He would have hidden his tracks better, and he would have kept using you as a shield. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She knew I was right. The truth was a bitter pill, but it was the only medicine left. I didn't do it to hurt you, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. I did it to save you. Even if you couldn't see it, even if you never forgive me for it. I would rather you be safe and hate me than be in danger and love a lie. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just cried, silent, heaving sobs that seemed to come from a place of utter devastation. I didn't try to comfort her. There was no comfort to give. This was the reality she had to live in now. After what felt like an eternity, she stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. I have to go, she said, not looking back. I'm staying with a friend. I can't be here. I can't be near any of it. I understand, I said, the words tasting like ash. She left. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again, surrounded by the wreckage. I had won. The corrupt politician was falling. The truth was exposed. But the cost was my daughter's heart. And I would carry that price for the rest of my life. This is the final lesson of betrayal. The shockwave doesn't just hit the guilty. It shatters everyone in its path. And when the dust settles, you are left standing in the ruins, wondering if the truth was worth the destruction. But you have to believe it was. You have to, or you'll drown in the aftermath. This story is over, but the healing, that may take a lifetime. If this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, understanding, share your one-word reaction in the comments. And if you believe that the truth, no matter how painful, is always the right path, then subscribe. Our channel is built on stories like these. Stories that are hard to tell, but necessary to hear. The silence after Anna left was a physical weight. Days bled into weeks. The headlines continued without me. Robert was formally indicted on multiple counts of bribery, fraud, and corruption. His smiling campaign photo was now stamped with the word accused in bold red letters. The political commentariat dissected his fall with clinical precision. He was a cautionary tale, a symbol of systemic rot. To me, he was just the man who had stolen my daughter. I tried to call her. I sent texts. They went unanswered. The one time her phone rang through, it was her friend who answered, her voice cold and protective. She doesn't want to talk to you, David. She needs space. Space. It was all I had. An empty, echoing house full of space. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong again. The worst was the guilt that crept in during the long, silent nights. Had there been another way? Could I have confronted Robert privately? Could I have forced Anna to see the truth without a public execution of her life? The questions were ghosts, haunting me. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang again. My heart, a tired old muscle, gave a familiar painful jolt. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was, Anna. She was holding a small suitcase. The rain had soaked her hair, plastering it to her forehead. She looked like a drowned, lost child. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, her eyes pools of utter exhaustion and defeat. And then she took a single stumbling step forward and fell into my arms. She didn't just cry. She broke. Great, heaving sobs racked her body as she clung to me, her fists gripping my shirt. I held her tight, my own tears falling silently into her wet hair, the rain cooling our heated skin. "I have nowhere else to go," she choked out between sobs. He's pleading guilty. There's a plea deal. They have everything. The FBI showed me the bank transfers, the secret accounts. He had a separate apartment, Dad. He had another life. I guided her inside, sat her on the sofa, and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. I made her tea. I did all the small fatherly things I had been desperate to do for weeks. She sipped the tea, her hands shaking so badly the china cup rattled in the saucer. "He lied about everything," she whispered, staring into the steam. "The late nights at community meetings, the trips to conferences. It was all a lie. I was just part of the set dressing, the loyal wife for the cameras." She looked up at me, her eyes finally meeting mine, and the raw pain in them was almost unbearable. "You were the only one who wasn't fooled. You were the only one who tried to save me, and I hated you for it. We always hate the rescuer who pulls us from the burning building," I said softly, sitting beside her. "Because the rescue is violent. It's scary. It hurts. And all we can see is the fire we're leaving behind, not the safety ahead." "I'm so sorry, Dad," she cried, her head dropping onto my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you." "I'm sorry for what I said." "Shh," I whispered, stroking her hair. "There's nothing to forgive. You are my daughter. I will always be here, no matter what." And in that moment, amidst the ruins of her marriage and the ashes of my relationship with her, a tiny, fragile seed of something new began to sprout. It wasn't the same as before. That trust, that innocence, was gone forever. This was different. This was a bond forged in the fire of truth, tempered by pain, and stronger for having been broken and remade. We had a long road ahead, therapy, a very public divorce, the shame and the gossip. But we would walk it together. The story didn't end with a political scandal or a criminal conviction. It ended here, on a worn-out sofa on a rainy afternoon, with a father holding his daughter while her world lay in pieces around them. It ended not with vengeance, but with grace. Not with victory, but with a hard-won, painful peace. The cost of the truth was everything, but in the end, it was the only thing that could set us free. This is the final chapter. The healing has begun. If you believe in second chances and the unbreakable bond of family, even through the darkest times, type "family first" in the comments. Thank you for being part of this difficult journey. Remember to subscribe for more stories about redemption, resilience, and the power of truth. The plea deal was finalized. Robert would serve 5 to 7 years in a federal prison. The news covered it for a day, then moved on to the next scandal. For the world, the story was over. For Anna and me, the real work was just beginning. She moved back into her old childhood room. The suitcase she'd arrived with stayed unpacked for a week, a silent monument to her transience, to the life that was no longer hers. She slept for 14 hours a day, the deep, comatose sleep of the emotionally shipwrecked. I'd leave meals outside her door, and sometimes they'd disappear, sometimes they wouldn't. The vibrant, confident woman I knew was gone, replaced by a quiet, hesitant ghost who flinched at the sound of the doorbell. The betrayal had seeped into her bones, making her question her own judgment, her own reality. "How could I not have known?" she'd ask me, her voice small in the dim light of the living room. "Was I that blind? That stupid?" "You weren't stupid, my love," I'd tell her, my heart aching. "You were trusting. You loved him, and he weaponized that love against you. That is his sin, not yours." The legal battles were replaced by quieter, more insidious ones. The shame she felt when she went to the grocery store and saw people whispering. The anger that would bubble up unexpectedly at a song on the radio, a photo in a drawer, a memory that would ambush her in the middle of the day. She wasn't just grieving a marriage. She was grieving the person she used to be. I learned to navigate this new landscape. I learned when to push her to talk and when to let the silence be. I learned that healing wasn't a straight line, but a messy, looping path with good days and terrible days. On the bad days, the shadow of my decision to leak the tape felt long and dark. Had my need for public justice compounded her private pain? One evening, we were watching an old movie, a comedy we'd both loved when she was a teenager. For the first time in months, I heard her laugh. It was a real, genuine, unforced sound. It was the most beautiful noise I'd heard in years. She caught me looking, and her smile faded slightly. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't you ever apologize for laughing," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. "Don't you ever." It was a small moment, a flicker of light in a long darkness, but it was everything. The political pundits had their closure. The court had its conviction, but our story was measured in different units. It was measured in the first time she didn't jump when the phone rang, the first time she talked about the future without a note of despair, the first time she called him Robert instead of him. The path forward would be long. There would be more bad days, but we were walking it together. The foundation of our relationship was no longer the simple, untested love of father and daughter. It was something sturdier, something built on the rubble of lies, fortified by shared pain and a mutual, hard-won respect. The truth had cost us everything. But in the quiet, stubborn resilience of my daughter, I was finally beginning to see that it had also given us our only chance at a real, honest future. A future where we could both look in the mirror and despite the scars, recognize the people staring back. This journey is over, but our lives, forever changed, go on. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find the strength to rebuild after a devastating betrayal, share your story in the comments. You are not alone. And if you believe in the power of truth and redemption, subscribe for more stories that explore the deepest challenges and triumphs of the human spirit. The seasons turned. The fierce winter of our crisis gave way to a tentative spring. It wasn't a dramatic change, but a slow thaw, marked by small, almost imperceptible shifts. Anna started unpacking her suitcase, not all at once, but one item at a time. A sweater in the drawer, a book on the nightstand. Each object placed was a quiet declaration. I am staying. I am rebuilding. She began to venture out beyond the grocery store. She signed up for a pottery class at the community center, something she'd always talked about but never done. Robert thought it was messy, she told me one evening, her hands covered in dried gray clay. Said it wasn't a productive hobby. She looked at her hands, a small defiant smile touching her lips. I think I liked the mess. I saw her reclaiming herself piece by piece. The person emerging wasn't the naive young woman from before, nor the broken ghost from after. She was someone new, more careful, yes, a little more guarded, but also stronger. Her kindness now had a backbone of steel. Her empathy had been deepened by her own pain. One Saturday, she came to me while I was reading in my armchair. Dad, she said, her voice clear and steady, I want to go back to school, to get my master's in social work. I put my book down. That's a wonderful idea. I want to help people, she continued, her eyes alight with a purpose I hadn't seen in years. People who feel trapped, people who've been made to feel small. I think I understand them now. My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. She wasn't just healing, she was alchemizing her pain into a tool for good. The very experience that was meant to destroy her was becoming her greatest source of strength. We didn't talk about Robert much anymore. He was a closed chapter, a phantom whose power over us was fading with each passing day. The legal proceedings were a distant echo. Our world had shrunk, then expanded again, but into a different shape, a shape that fit the two of us, our shared history of survival, its cornerstone. The story of the scandal, the tape, the betrayal, that story had an end. It was written in court documents and news archives. But our story, the story of a father and a daughter, didn't end. It simply turned a page. The next chapter wasn't about vengeance or justice or even forgiveness. It was about the quiet, ordinary, extraordinary business of building a life, not on a foundation of fairy tales, but on the solid, unshakable ground of truth and unconditional love. We had walked through the fire. We had paid the price. And on the other side, we found not the ruins we expected, but a clearing, a place to plant a new garden. The soil was still rocky, the memories like stones just beneath the surface. But the sun was warm, and for the first time in a very long time, it felt like we were finally home. This is where we leave them, not at an ending, but at a beginning they earned with tears and courage. If this story moved you, if you believe in new beginnings after great pain, type "new beginnings" in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to hear that after the storm, there is calm, and after the long night, there is a dawn. Subscribe for more stories of hope, resilience, and the quiet power of the human spirit to not just endure, but to rise. Thank you for watching. Anna's new life was taking root. Her application to the social work program was accepted. The clay from her pottery class now lived permanently under her fingernails, a badge of honor. We had found a new rhythm, a comfortable silence that was no longer heavy with grief, but peaceful with understanding. And then the letter arrived. It was a plain white envelope, my address typed neatly. No return address. But the postmark was from a federal correctional complex. I held it in my hands at the kitchen table, the paper feeling strangely cold. Anna was in the garden, repotting a plant. I could see her through the window, humming to herself. This envelope felt like a ghost trying to claw its way back into our world. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to tear it up, burn the pieces, and scatter the ashes to the wind. But I couldn't. Secrets had started this war, and I refused to let another one fester. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of cheap, lined paper. The handwriting was neat, controlled, but the words were anything but. David, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know that's beyond reach. I'm writing to tell you that you were right. Not about the law or the bribes. You were right about the rot. It wasn't just in my career, it was in me. I built my life on a foundation of wanting more, of needing to be seen as important. Anna, my career, my public image, they were all just props in a play I was directing for an audience of one. Myself. I thought I had won, but you were the only one who saw I was losing my soul. You didn't just expose a crime, you collapsed the entire stage. For the first time in years, there are no lights, no audience, no script, just the silence. And in the silence, I am finally having to listen to the man I became. It is a terrifying conversation. I don't expect a reply. I just needed you to know that the bomb you dropped didn't just destroy a corrupt politician. It annihilated a fraud. And for that, for giving me the one thing I could never give myself, a brutal, unvarnished truth. I suppose I must thank you. Tell Anna, no, don't tell her anything. Some words are too little, too late. Robert, I read it twice, then a third time. There was no plea for mercy, no attempt at manipulation. It was a confession from a ruin, a stark and startling admission of guilt that went far deeper than any court had jurisdiction over. The anger I had carried for so long, the cold ember of vengeance in my heart, suddenly had nothing left to burn. He had taken my hatred and disarmed it with a truth so raw it was disorienting. Anna came in from the garden, her hands dirty, a smudge of soil on her cheek. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the letter in my hand. I looked from the paper to my daughter's face, now marked with the honest dirt of her new life, not the invisible grime of her old one. I had a choice. To hand her this ghost, to risk reopening a wound that was finally scabbing over, or to protect her, to let this chapter stay closed. I made my decision. "Nothing important," I said, folding the letter and sliding it back into the envelope. "Just some old business." I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and held the flame to the corner of the envelope. We watched together as it blackened and curled, the words turning to smoke, rising up the chimney and disappearing into the vast, forgiving sky. Some truths are meant to set you free. Others are just anchors to a past that no longer exists. The greatest act of love is knowing the difference. Anna put her hand on my arm. She didn't ask again. She just stood with me, watching the last physical trace of Robert Vance turn to ash. The past was finally, truly over. Our future, whatever it held, was ours alone. This is the real ending, not with a verdict, but with a quiet release. Not with a bang, but with the soft, final whisper of a page turning, never to be read again. If you believe in closure and the power of letting go, type "let go" in the comments. Share this with anyone who needs permission to release the ghosts of their past. Subscribe for more stories about finding peace after the storm. Thank you for being a part of our journey. Time, the great healer, continued its quiet work. A year drifted by, marked not by the dramatic beats of scandal, but by the gentle rhythm of a life rebuilt. Anna's laughter once again became a familiar sound in the house, no longer a rare and precious event, but a daily melody. She thrived in her social work program, her own pain having forged in her a profound empathy for others. She was no longer a victim of a story. She was the author of a new one. One evening, we were sorting through the attic, a task we'd both avoided for years. It was a tomb of old memories, and we were finally ready to be its archaeologists. We found her childhood art, my old fishing gear, and boxes of her mother's things. And then, tucked inside a dusty volume of old poetry, I found it. A photograph. It was of Anna and Robert, taken in their first year of marriage. They were at a picnic, laughing, the sun dappling through the trees behind them. He was looking at her not with the calculated charm of a politician, but with a genuine, unguarded affection. She was gazing back, her face radiant with a belief in a happy future. I stared at the photo, expecting the old, familiar anger to surge, but it didn't. Instead, a complex and surprising sorrow washed over me. It wasn't for the man he became, but for the people they were in that captured moment, for the potential that was squandered, for the love that was corrupted by greed and ambition. Anna came over and saw the photo in my hands. She didn't snatch it away or look away in pain. She simply looked at it, her expression thoughtful, almost peaceful. "We were so young," she said softly, her finger gently tracing the image of her own smiling face. "He wasn't always a monster, Dad. He was just a man who made terrible, unforgivable choices." The monster came later. I put my arm around her shoulders. "I know," I said. And for the first time, I truly did. My rage had blinded me to this nuance. The man I destroyed and the man she had loved were, for a time, the same person. Acknowledging that didn't excuse his actions, but it humanized our own tragedy. "What should we do with it?" I asked. She took the photograph from my hand and looked at it for a long, silent moment. Then, with a soft sigh, she placed it back inside the poetry book and closed the cover. "We put it back," she said. "Some memories aren't for throwing away. They're for understanding. That girl believed in love. I don't want to forget her. She's part of who I am." In that moment, I saw the final stage of her healing. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it. It was about acknowledging the beauty that once existed without letting it poison the present. She had found a way to hold the truth of the good and the truth of the terrible in the same hand, without contradiction. We finished cleaning the attic as the sun set, casting long golden beams through the dusty air. The house felt lighter, as if we had not just cleared out physical clutter, but spiritual baggage as well. That night, as I sat in my chair, I realized the legacy of the truth I had unleashed. It wasn't a political scandal or a prison sentence. Its true legacy was the woman my daughter had become. Wiser, stronger, and imbued with a compassion that could only be born from profound suffering. The truth had been a wrecking ball. It had shattered our lives. But from the rubble, we had built something new, something more authentic and resilient. The scar tissue was strong. We had not just survived, we had evolved. Our story is a testament to the fact that the most painful truths can, in time, give way to the most profound peace. The storm is long gone. What remains is a deep, unshakable calm, and the quiet understanding that we are and always will be okay. This is our final farewell. Thank you for walking this path with us. If this story has given you hope, please share it. And remember, no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes.